My name is Clara Reynolds. For years, I had covered every one of my sister's birthday celebrations, from the cake and decor to the champagne she never even thanked me for. This year, I wanted it to be different. I reserved the entire restaurant, handled every arrangement, and convinced myself that maybe this time she'd finally see me as part of the family. When I arrived, the valet took my keys and the doorman checked the guest list before quietly calling security. Something in his expression told me something wasn't right. Then I heard her voice behind him, calm and rehearsed, as though she'd practiced it. "She's not allowed in." I froze. My sister stood there in a glittering gold dress, smiling as if nothing about the moment was cruel. My parents stood beside her, silent and unmoving. Then my father gave a low chuckle and said, "You really thought you were welcome?" My mother offered a faint smile, her eyes devoid of sympathy. I waited for someone to speak, to remind them I was the one who paid for everything. But no one said a word. The security guard gave me an apologetic look and told me I had to step back. I turned and walked toward the parking lot. The music from inside faded as the doors closed behind me. Sitting in my car, I unlocked my phone, typed a message, and pressed send. The glow from the screen stretched across the windshield as I took a slow breath, uncertain whether I felt fury or emptiness. 30 minutes later, something happened none of them would ever forget. If you were in my place, thrown out of the very party you funded, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know whether you would stay silent or strike back. I drove home in silence, my mind weighed down by the echo of their laughter. I kept replaying that moment at the door, wondering why I still expected them to treat me like family. When I reached my apartment, I felt drained, as though every bit of energy had been stripped away. I dropped my keys on the counter and saw the folder waiting on my desk. Inside were every invoice, receipt, and email confirmation for the party I had financed. I sat down and flipped through the papers one by one. Each page carried proof of my effort: flowers ordered weeks early, the designer cake, the rented restaurant, the custom decor. I remembered how proud I'd felt when everything came together perfectly. I had told myself that maybe this time my sister would thank me, that maybe my parents would finally see me. Instead, all I saw was the look on Maggie's face when she said I didn't belong. That memory burned through me like acid. I closed the folder and stared at it for a long moment. The feeling that rose inside wasn't sadness anymore. It was disgust. Not just at them, but at myself for letting it happen again. I gathered the papers and began tearing them apart. The sound was sharp, satisfying. The pieces fell in a heap on the table, white scraps scattered like broken promises. I tied them in a trash bag and set it by the door. The weight of it felt lighter than the burden I'd been carrying for years. I turned on my laptop. The glow of the screen lit the dark room as I opened my bank account. Maggie's name appeared again and again on the list of transactions: rent, phone bill, credit card, tuition, even small monthly transfers for her emergencies. I had made each one automatically, without a second thought. I stared at the list for a while, my cursor resting on the cancel button. Then I pressed it. Each confirmation felt like shutting a door. Rent canceled, credit card canceled, tuition canceled. The screen refreshed, leaving only my own expenses behind. Something shifted inside me. Not anger, not relief, but a stillness, like the quiet after a storm has spent its strength. For the first time, I saw how much of my life had revolved around keeping them content, buying peace that never lasted. I picked up my phone. The chat with Maggie was still open from days ago, filled with polite, empty messages. I typed one sentence: "Handle your own bills from now on." I read it twice, then sent it. There was no shake in my hands, no hesitation, only a finality that felt almost pure. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock, a sound I'd never noticed before, steady and calm, as if time itself had been waiting for me to do this. I looked around the apartment, simple, small, but mine. No one could take that from me. I walked to the window. The reflection looking back was someone I barely recognized. The woman who used to buy affection was gone. What remained was tired but steady, hurt, yet unwilling to kneel for acceptance any longer. I thought about the years I'd spent explaining, apologizing, fixing everything my family broke, all for the illusion of belonging. That hope was gone now, and strangely, I didn't miss it. I whispered the words aloud, tasting them carefully as though they were a vow. I'm done funding my own humiliation. My voice didn't tremble. It sounded firm. Final. The kind of truth that doesn't need to be said twice. Morning light slipped through the blinds when a knock echoed at the door. It started softly, then grew more urgent. I hesitated before opening it, expecting silence. Maybe a package, but not her. Maggie stood there, clutching a bouquet of lilies wrapped in pale paper. Her eyes were swollen, her voice unsteady. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside without a word. She entered like someone walking on fragile glass. The scent of the flowers filled the room. Too sweet, almost desperate. Maggie set them on the table and turned toward me. "I was wrong," she began. "I shouldn't have said what I did yesterday." "That's not what I meant." I said nothing. She kept talking, her voice quivering between apology and defense. "You know how Mom gets, how Dad pushes. I didn't want to make it worse. I thought you'd understand." I watched her face as she spoke. There was a rhythm in her words, the practiced tone of someone who fixed problems with excuses, not sincerity. Her tears flowed easily, and for a second I wondered if they were for me, or just for herself. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Clara, please. I can't do this without your help. Rent's due in a week and my cards are maxed. You've always been the one I could count on. I'll change. I promise." The word promise hit harder than I expected. I had heard it too many times. Promises of gratitude, of change, of appreciation. Every one of them had vanished the moment she got what she wanted. I let her finish, then took a slow breath before answering. "You'll have to stand on your own for once." My voice came out calm, almost kind, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, hurt, disbelief, and something sharper beneath. She stared at me for a few seconds before scoffing. "So that's it? After everything I've been through?" I didn't respond. She snatched her purse, her tears disappearing as quickly as they'd come. "You think you're better than me now, don't you?" Her voice cracked. "Fine, don't help me. But don't come crying when you end up alone." She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to shake the frame. For a while, I didn't move. The bouquet sat on the table, petals trembling from the draft. I thought about throwing it away, but didn't. Instead, I made coffee and sat by the window. The apartment was silent again, the kind of silence I had once prayed for. I told myself this was peace, not emptiness. That illusion lasted until later that afternoon. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications. At first, I ignored them, thinking they were emails or reminders. Then I saw Maggie's name trending on social media. She had posted a long caption under a photo of herself crying, claiming her jealous sister had cut her off out of spite. She hadn't used my name, but the details were too clear to mistake. "Some people act generous just to hold power over you," she wrote. "And when you stop worshiping them, they show their true face." The comments came fast. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers calling her brave, calling her sister cruel. I read every word without flinching. For years, I had been her silent supporter, the unseen hand holding her world together. Now she had turned me into a villain to keep her story alive. I closed the app, not in anger, but with final understanding. I deleted her number, her messages, her contact from every account. It wasn't rage guiding me, just the certainty that I was done playing her role. I walked to the trash and dropped the bouquet inside. The flowers were already wilting, their stems bending under their own weight. For the first time in years, I felt something close to freedom. It didn't roar or demand attention. It settled quietly, like air filling a space that had long been vacant. The next morning began like any other. I was brewing coffee when my laptop chimed with a new email. The sender's name made me pause mid-motion, Jenna Myers. It had been years since we'd last spoken. She was a colleague from the firm I once worked for, Someone who had silently stood by me through long nights and quiet humiliations I never shared with family. I hesitated before clicking open. The subject line read, "You should see this." Inside was a short message. "Found this while editing last week's event footage. You deserve to know." Attached was a single video file labeled backstage to raw.move. My stomach tightened as I pressed play. The screen flickered with shaky behind-the-scenes footage. Decorators adjusting tablecloths, waiters carrying trays, the low hum of chatter before guests arrived. Then I saw her, Maggie, standing near the bar with two friends, laughing, a champagne flute in hand. Her voice rose clear above the background noise. "It's her money anyway," she said, grinning. "She'll pay even if she doesn't come." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The laughter surrounding her felt sharp as glass, each sound cutting deeper than the last. The video continued, her giving orders, posing for photos, smiling for the camera. The perfect hostess of a party I had unknowingly financed for my own humiliation. I replayed the clip again and again, as if repetition might dull the sting. But it didn't. The more I watched, the less anger I felt. What replaced it wasn't calm or forgiveness, but something emptier, quieter. A realization that this had never been about misunderstanding. It had always been about entitlement. She never thought she needed to earn anything, because she knew I would always pay the price, both literally and emotionally. When I finally stopped the video, my coffee had gone cold. Another email notification blinked across the screen. Jenna had sent a follow-up. "I remember how proud you were when you told me about the party," she wrote. "You didn't deserve that. You deserved better." For the first time in a long while, someone said something that didn't sound like pity or judgment, just truth. I sat there for several minutes, rereading her message. My reflection in the dark monitor looked almost unfamiliar. Someone quieter, older, steadier. I clicked download, saving the file into a new folder. Then I printed a still image from the video. Maggie laughing, glass raised midair, the exact moment she mocked me. I slid the photo into a folder labeled for later. As the printer hummed, my mind began to clear. Every scene from the past few weeks replayed like a puzzle finally fitting together. My parents' smiles, her fake apology, the online post, the endless loop of blame and silence. I had spent my whole life walking away to protect peace that never existed. Every retreat had been mistaken for weakness. Every silence had been treated like permission. Not this time. I gathered the printed pages, stacked them neatly beside the folder, and closed my laptop. The evidence wasn't just proof of what she said. It was proof of who she truly was, and who I no longer needed to be. I didn't know exactly how the next confrontation would unfold, but I knew it was coming. My parents would see the truth, not because I wanted revenge, but because they needed to stop believing her story. I slipped the folder into my bag, zipped it carefully, and stood by the window. The world outside moved as if nothing had changed, yet something within me had shifted entirely. For the first time, I wasn't running from the noise. I was ready to face it. I turned off the lights, grabbed my keys, and whispered the words I had waited years to mean. This time, I'm not walking away. The house looked exactly as I remembered, too clean, too quiet, as if frozen in time. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, watching the soft flicker of lights through the living room window. Inside, my parents sat together on the couch. The television glowed, though neither of them seemed to be watching. My mother's posture was stiff. My father's face held that same old mask of distance. When I knocked, a long pause followed before the door finally opened. My mother, Renee, greeted me with a cautious smile. "Clara, we weren't expecting you." Her tone carried that polite distance she reserved for neighbors. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. My father, Richard, looked up from the couch but didn't stand. The faint sound of a game show filled the air. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Setting my bag down, I pulled out the printed still from the video and placed it on the coffee table. Then I opened my laptop and pressed play. The recording began, Laughter, clinking glasses, glittering lights, and then Maggie's voice filled the room. It's her money anyway. She'll pay even if she doesn't come. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the TV in the background. Renee shifted uneasily, glancing at my father as if urging him to say something. Richard leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the frozen frame of Maggie's smile. Family issues shouldn't go public, he said at last, his voice low but steady. I studied his face, trying to decide if it was disappointment or defense I heard. It's already public, I replied quietly. She made sure of that. Renee sighed sharply, rubbing her temples. You've always made things dramatic, Clara. You could have come to us before letting everyone see. Now people are talking and your sister's humiliated. I blinked, hardly believing it. She's humiliated? She staged a lie and used my name for sympathy. My voice stayed calm, though each word carried weight. I'm not here to argue. I just thought you should see the truth. Richard sighed, the same sound that had ended every childhood argument I ever lost. You girls have always been different, he muttered without looking up. Maggie's impulsive. You're sensitive. That's just how it is. There it was again, the same quiet dismissal disguised as understanding. I had grown up under that tone. It had taught me to fold my feelings into silence. Not this time. If you want to keep calling it family, then keep it private, I said. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my house key, and placed it on the table. But do it without me. Renee's eyes widened. Clara, don't be ridiculous. I met her gaze. I'm not. I'm finished. I closed the laptop, slid it into my bag, and stood. The weight of years seemed to lift as I took a step toward the door. Richard didn't stop me. Renee called after me once, her voice soft, but not enough to make me turn back. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. The crunch of gravel under my shoes sounded almost reassuring. My phone buzzed just as I reached for the car door. Maggie's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring until silence returned. Then I turned it off. Through the window, I could still see the glow from the living room, my parents sitting exactly where I'd left them, unchanged, unmoved, unwilling to see. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just finality. I started the engine and looked straight ahead. Whatever came next, I would face it alone. And that realization didn't frighten me. It felt like freedom. A few days later, a message appeared from Noah Bennett, a journalist I hadn't spoken to in years. We had once worked together at the community paper before he moved to Denver Weekly. His message was short. When I finally paused the video, my coffee sat untouched and cold. Another email notification blinked to life. Jenna had sent a follow-up. I remember how proud you were when you told me about the party, she wrote. You didn't deserve that. You deserved better. For the first time in ages, someone said something that didn't sound like pity or judgment, just honesty. I sat there for minutes, rereading her message again and again. My reflection in the dark screen looked almost unfamiliar. Someone quieter, older, more grounded. I clicked download, saving the file into a new folder. Then I printed a still from the video, Maggie laughing, glass raised midair, caught at the exact moment she mocked me. I slid the photo into a folder labeled for later. As the printer hummed, my thoughts began to clear. Every scene from the last few weeks replayed like a puzzle, finally locking into place. My parents' smiles, her false apology, the online post, the endless loop of blame and silence. I had spent a lifetime walking away to keep peace that never truly existed. Every retreat mistaken for weakness. Every silence treated as permission. Not anymore. I stacked the printed pages neatly beside the folder and shut my laptop. The evidence wasn't just proof of what she said. It was proof of who she truly was, and who I no longer needed to be. I didn't know exactly how the next confrontation would unfold, but I knew it was coming. My parents would see the truth, not because I wanted revenge, but because they needed to stop believing her lies. I placed the folder in my bag, zipped it carefully, and stood by the window. The world outside moved on as if nothing had changed, yet something inside me had shifted entirely. For the first time, I wasn't the one fleeing the noise. I was ready to face it. I turned off the lights, grabbed my keys, and whispered the words I had waited years to mean, "This time, I'm not walking away." The house looked exactly as I remembered. Too clean, too still, as if time had stopped inside it. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, watching the living room lights flicker. Through the window, I could see my parents seated together on the couch. The television glowed faintly, though neither seemed to watch. My mother's posture was rigid, my father's face fixed in that familiar mask of detachment. When I knocked, a long pause followed before the door opened. My mother, Renee, greeted me with a cautious smile. "Clara, we weren't expecting you." Her tone carried that same practiced politeness she reserved for neighbors or distant relatives. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. My father, Richard, looked up from the couch but didn't move. The faint sound of a game show filled the silence. I didn't waste words. I set my bag down, pulled out the printed still from the video, and placed it on the coffee table. Then I opened my laptop and pressed play. The recording began. Laughter, clinking glasses, the shimmer of party lights. Then Maggie's voice echoed through the room. "It's her money anyway. She'll pay even if she doesn't come." No one spoke. Only the low hum of the TV broke the quiet. Renee shifted in her seat, glancing toward my father as if silently urging him to intervene. Richard leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at Maggie's frozen smile on the screen. "Family issues shouldn't go public," he said finally, voice low but firm. I looked at him, searching for whether that tone held disappointment or defense. "It's already public," I said softly. "She made sure of that." Renee sighed sharply, rubbing her temples. "You've always made things dramatic, Clara. You could have come to us before airing it out. Now people are talking, and your sister's humiliated." I blinked, stunned. She's humiliated? She staged a lie and used my name for sympathy. My voice stayed even, though every word felt heavier. "I'm not here to argue. I just thought you should see the truth." Richard exhaled the same weary sigh that had ended every argument of my childhood. "You girls have always been different," he said, eyes averted. "Maggie's impulsive. You're sensitive. That's just how it is." There it was, the same dismissal disguised as understanding. I had grown up under that tone. It had trained me to compress my feelings into silence. But not this time. "If you want to keep calling it family, then keep it private," I said. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my house key, and placed it on the table. "But do it without me." Renee's eyes widened. "Clara, don't be ridiculous." I met her gaze. "I'm not. I'm done." I closed the laptop, slid it back into my bag, and stood. Years of weight seemed to lift slightly as I stepped toward the door. Richard didn't move. Renee called my name once, her voice soft, but not enough to make me turn. Outside, the air a bit colder. I walked to my car, the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes oddly grounding. My phone buzzed just as I reached the door handle, Maggie's name flashing across the screen. I let it ring until silence returned, then switched the phone off. Through the car window, I could still see the warm glow of the living room, my parents unmoved, unchanged, unwilling to see. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just finality. I started the engine and looked ahead. Whatever came next, I'd face it alone, and that thought didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. A few days later, I received a message from Noah Bennett, a journalist I hadn't spoken to in years. He used to work with me at the community paper before moving to the Denver Weekly. His message was brief. "Saw what's been happening. You deserve to tell your side." I hesitated before replying, unsure if I was ready to share more. But Noah wasn't one for gossip. He always sought the truth, and that I could trust. We met at a small cafe near the university. The conversation began carefully. He asked how I was doing, and I said I was fine, though we both knew it wasn't true. I handed him the folder that had become my armor, the printed receipts, the video stills, the statements. He examined each page with quiet focus. "You kept everything," he said softly. I nodded. It's all I had left to defend myself. Noah leaned back, thoughtful. If we frame this as a story about financial manipulation within families, without naming anyone, people will still understand. And you'll control the narrative. His words felt like a door opening after years of silence. I agreed. Over the next 2 days, we shaped the article together. I wrote my part as if speaking to my younger self, the one who thought generosity equaled love. Noah edited with care, trimming words but preserving the soul. When it was ready, we published it under the headline, "The Price of Family Loyalty." The story spread quickly. By evening, hundreds of comments flooded in, people sharing their own experiences, siblings draining savings, parents playing favorites, partners exploiting trust. They weren't angry, they were relieved. They saw themselves in my story. Yet as the article's views climbed, I realized something was still unfinished. The truth wasn't mine to hide behind an alias anymore. That night, I opened my phone and started a live stream. No filters, no lighting, just me at my desk. My hands trembled at first, but as the viewer count jumped from 200 to 2,000, something inside me steadied. "I'm not here to accuse anyone," I began. "I just want to talk about what happens when love and obligation blur together." I spoke slowly, describing how generosity became expectation, silence became guilt, and kindness turned into currency. The comments filled with hearts and encouragement. "You're brave. You're not alone. I've been there too." The numbers grew until I stopped watching. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. By morning, the stream had gone viral. News blogs picked it up. Podcasts quoted it. The phrase family financial gaslighting trended across Twitter. Maggie's PR firm issued a statement denying involvement, but it was too late. Screenshots of her posts, sponsorships, and smiling endorsements flooded with comments. Within a week, her biggest client canceled their contract, then another. Her company issued a quiet apology for misrepresentation. When I read the headlines, I didn't feel victory, only clarity. The truth had moved faster than revenge ever could. That night, I went live again. Not to continue the chaos, but to end it. "I'm not here for revenge," I said calmly. "I'm here for closure." The comments poured in, but I ended the stream after minutes. As the screen went black, I saw my reflection, lighter, freer. The guilt and fear that had followed me for years were gone. What remained wasn't triumph, but peace. I closed my laptop, exhaled deeply, and finally felt what I'd been searching for all along, the quiet strength of letting go. Weeks passed quietly, yet the ripple kept spreading. One morning, a headline made me sit up straight. "Local couple under tax investigation, financial irregularities at R&R Consulting." The article named Richard and Renee Bennett, my parents. It explained how years of underreported income and charitable deductions had triggered an audit. The journalist mentioned a viral discussion about family finances but didn't name me. The irony was almost poetic. The same people who told me to keep things private now had their own exposed for all to see. Reporters soon crowded their neighborhood. Richard's company called it a clerical error, but the damage was done. Renee stopped attending charity brunches. Their friends avoided their gaze. When the tax penalty came, it was more than they could afford. They had to list their house for sale. Seeing the listing online felt surreal. The same house where every dinner ended in quiet judgment, now staged for strangers in bright real estate photos. Meanwhile, Maggie's downfall deepened. After losing her sponsors, journalists began digging into her PR firm. Former clients spoke of unpaid work, manipulated campaigns, falsified endorsements. Her name trended again, this time beside fraud and fabrication. I saw one clip of her leaving a studio, head down, sunglasses on, reporters shouting questions she couldn't answer. I didn't feel satisfaction, only weary recognition. The truth always finds a way. My inbox filled with interview requests, podcasts, advocacy offers. I declined them all except one. A media company in Seattle offered me a position as director of communications for their transparency initiative. The role aligned with everything I once dreamed of, before my life became about cleaning up others' chaos. When I accepted, the HR director wrote, Your story shows what integrity looks like under pressure. That line stayed with me longer than any apology ever could. In the final week before moving, I drove through Boulder one last time. The snow was melting, revealing the first hints of green. Streets that once carried the weight of memory now felt neutral, like pages ready to be rewritten. I packed the last box, turned off the lights, and stood still for a moment. For the first time in years, the silence felt like home. As I checked my phone for directions, a notification appeared. One new message from Maggie. It read, "I didn't think you'd actually leave." For a long moment, I stared at the screen. There was no anger left, no resentment, not even pity, only understanding. Maggie had built her world on control, controlling narratives, people, outcomes. My leaving wasn't just distance. It was proof she no longer held power over me. I deleted the message without replying. At the airport the next morning, the sky above the Rockies glowed a pale blue. My flight to Seattle was boarding. I looked out the window as the plane lifted above the clouds, Boulder shrinking into a patchwork of snow and rooftops. My chest tightened, not from grief but from release. For the first time, I felt untethered. As sunlight filled the cabin, I whispered to myself, "Leaving isn't running away. It's freedom." The words felt light like air. The past had lost its grip, and what lay ahead wasn't revenge nor redemption, but a beginning. Life in Seattle moved quietly, almost as if the city had been waiting for me. My new apartment overlooked a stretch of water that shimmered silver each morning. I kept my days simple: work, walks, coffee with colleagues who knew nothing about my past. There were no dinner invitations I felt obligated to attend, no family calls layered with guilt. Peace, I learned, wasn't loud. It was steady. At work, I rebuilt what I had once lost: trust in myself. My team respected me, not for what I had endured, but for how I carried myself. I no longer needed validation from anyone who measured worth by convenience or appearance. Each day when I closed my laptop, I felt a quiet kind of pride, the kind that grows unseen, like roots beneath the surface. Sometimes late at night, messages appeared in my inbox from people I had never met. "Your live stream helped me talk to my mother. I finally stood up for myself after hearing your story. Thank you for showing that walking away isn't weakness." I read every one of them, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, always humbled. Their words reminded me that what had once been my shame had become someone else's permission to heal. One evening after work, I opened an old notebook. Between its empty pages, I began to write, not to relive pain, but to capture perspective. My pen moved easily, the words flowing without hesitation. Family isn't defined by blood, but by respect. I underlined it twice. That sentence felt truer than anything I'd ever said aloud. Blood can bind, but respect is what sustains. Without it, even love withers. Weeks later, when a new colleague suggested creating a short talk for the company's social channel, I agreed. Not a retelling, just a reflection. The studio was small, only a single light and a camera. I looked straight ahead and spoke calmly. "Thank you for staying until the end. If you've ever had to walk away to protect your peace, know this: you made the right choice." My voice didn't tremble. For the first time, it sounded like someone who had stopped fighting ghosts. The clip went online that same night. Within hours, messages and comments appeared beneath it. Stories of boundaries, forgiveness, self-worth. I replied to one, then another, until I lost count. Finally, I wrote, "Share your thoughts below. I'll be reading them all." And I meant it. This wasn't about attention anymore. It was about connection, the kind that doesn't demand anything in return. The next morning, I woke early. The city was still half asleep, the streets glistening from last night's rain. I brewed coffee, tied back my hair, and stood by the door of my apartment. For a moment, I listened to the hum of traffic below, the quiet rhythm of a place that now felt like home. Then I turned the handle and opened the door. Light spilled in, golden and soft. It brushed across the floor, the walls, and everything new. I stepped forward, letting it fill the space around me. There was no need for closure anymore. The story had already found its ending. Not in revenge, not in loss, but in understanding. As the sun rose higher, I whispered one final thought to myself, a truth I had learned the hard way but would never forget. Peace isn't something you find in others. It's something you choose every single day, and with that, I smiled. The door stood open, and for the first time in years, so did I.